Every institution that is established, or any political candidate that runs for office, has something what we call an agenda. And I have slides today again, so we can help, you can follow me while I'm talking for Sister Greta. And I'll speak slowly. All right. Every institution that is established, or any political leader that runs for office, has what we call an agenda. And an agenda, by definition, is an underlying, often ideological plan or a program. So, in other words, an agenda lays out step by step, in detail, the action plan that the institution or political candidate plans to implement in order for their plan or program, in other words, the idea, to be executed. Now, for the rest of this teaching, I'd like to suggest a substitute word for agenda, and that word is a word that I've used many times while I've been up here, and that word is purpose. So in place of agenda, every time you hear me say agenda, think purpose, okay? Now, let's think for a second. Institutions and political leaders have tried implementing various agendas, several agendas, many agendas through history, in order to make their country or nation a better place. But all that didn't work. Millions and billions of trillions of dollars have been spent in the last few decades in an attempt to reverse social disintegration. But the problems still seem to grow. Society has tried several agendas: a political agenda, a social agenda, an economic agenda, and even a religious agenda. But all those agendas have failed miserably. The slides, please. We have tried every conceivable man-made agenda to counteract social devolution, and still there seems to be no change. Every agenda put forward has failed. Every agenda laid out by man has failed. And because everything, all the problems are still here, they still seem to grow, and they ain't going away. So after analyzing all of this, I've come to the conclusion that whatever it is that we're doing, it ain't working. We ain't doing it right at all. Now, all the agendas we are putting on the table, they ain't working. They don't fit. Now, like any political figure, God, he is a king, and he has his own agenda, because God is a political figure. He's not a religious figure. He's king. And every king has an agenda as well. So, if God is king, that means he also has an agenda that he wants executed on planet Earth. So I submit to you that it's time for us as believers to do away with all these frail man-made agendas and get back to the king's agenda. The king's agenda. There are institutions, which are three of them, and these are set up by God through which he works in the earth. And these are the family, and the church, and the government. He has an agenda for each one of these institutions. And the reason he set those up is because he chose those three institutions to play an integral part in his overall execution of his agenda here on earth. All three of them, the family, the church, and government. They all have three different functions, but all are used by him to execute his agenda on the earth. So today I want to focus on one in particular, the king's agenda for the church. Because although all these other institutions are important, in my opinion, the church is, to me, the most important one, because the church really is a catalyst. And for all the science-educated majors in here, all you children that are still in school, you're in chemistry class. I wasn't really too good in chemistry, but I remember this. A catalyst is an element that affects change without being changed by the reaction. A catalyst affects change. So it causes things to react, but the catalyst itself is not changed by the reaction that it causes. So really, the church is supposed to be the bridge between the family and the government, and it's supposed to affect change in both family and government without family or government changing it. Another example of that is a tea bag. You know, when you put tea in hot water, you put a tea bag in hot water, and the pressure, the heat causes the tea to change the color of the water, but the tea bag is not affected. That's the way the church is supposed to be. When the church is placed in the middle of government and the family, and the pressure hits it, and the hot water hits it, the church is not supposed to change, but it's supposed to change the society and the culture. That's what happened in Acts. When the Jewish authorities and the Roman government put the pressure on the church, and instead of church scrambling, it started to spread. That was the tea bag. That was a catalyst. Affects change, but the church itself is not changed. But sad to say, instead of the church being the change agent of families and the change agent of government, we have allowed the distortion of families and the corruption in government to bring change to the church and dilute the true essence of what the church is supposed to be. Why is that so? Why has the church allowed the influences of family and the influences of government to cause it to change? The answer to this particular dilemma is the misunderstanding of the true nature of the church. So let's take a step back and revisit the king's agenda for the church. There's a principle in biblical studies, and everybody who is a biblical scholar probably knows this, that is called the law of first mention. And that law simply states that whenever you see a particular word or concept in the Bible for the first time, if it's defined in that first part that you saw it, that their definition serves as the basis for the foundation of the rest of the understanding of that word for the rest of the Bible. Let me explain that again. The law of first mention states that a word or concept that you see for the first time in anywhere in the Bible, if it's defined there, that means that definition carries over for the rest of the Bible. So, in order for us to understand the king's agenda for the church, we got to go back and look at where the church is first mentioned. The first mention of the word church is found in Matthew 16, 18 to 19. Now, I never realized how loaded these verses were with meaning until I started to study them. And as I started to study them, in relation to the church's agenda, I began to see that we are operating way off from what the church is supposed to be. So I really want to take my time and kind of milk these two verses so we can really grasp what the church is supposed to be. These two verses summarize what the church is and what the purpose of the church is. But in Matthew 16, let's just give a little background. In this particular passage, Jesus and his disciples come to this particular location, Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus asks them, all right, dudes, you've been hearing a lot of people talking, so who people been saying that I am? And they, the disciples, answered, some say you are Elijah, some say you are Isaiah, some say you are a prophet, some say you are a good man, some say you are a good healer. All of them say, a bunch of good things. All these things are not bad, All these things are good, but although they were good, they were not really what Jesus truly is. So then now, Jesus turned around and said, okay, I hear what you say, they say, but now what do you say I am? Everybody was about stunned for a minute, and then Peter just pop up, not just pop up, but by divine revelation said, you are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. And then those events, that statement, set the stage for verses 18 and 19. So let's look at verse 18. Jesus says, thou art Peter. Remember, this is after Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus now says to Peter, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Now, what exactly is this rock that Jesus is referring to? What did Jesus mean here when he turned to Peter and said, you are Peter, I'm going to build my church on this rock? Was Peter the rock? Was Jesus the rock? Much controversy seems to exist over this one statement. Fortunately for us, the answer to this important question lies inside of the text. So let's take a look. First of all, we need to take a look at the meanings of Peter and rock. Now, in the Greek language, the word Peter is pronounced Petros. And Petros, slide please, is a masculine noun denoting a small, movable piece of stone or a rock originating from an immovable rock, a Petra. Now, the Greek word for rock in that same verse is pronounced Petra, which is a feminine noun denoting a large rock or a cliff, firm and immovable. So, what can we conclude from these statements? We can conclude based on these definitions that it would be impossible for the rock and Peter to be the same thing. Slide, please. Next slide. This here is an example of a Petros and a Petra. A Petros, however you pronounce it, is a large rock. Now, the definition says it's a small rock, or a large rock, but it's a large rock or a small rock in comparison to the Petra. This here is the foundation that Jesus is building on. This here is a part of it. This is the Peter, this is the Petra. Keep that in mind for concept's sake. All right? You just keep that slide up real quick, please. So, the rock is Petra and Peter is Petros. It cannot be the same person. Because, first of all, Petros is a masculine noun and Petra is a feminine noun. So how can a feminine noun be for a masculine guy? In French and Spanish, you can't have a feminine noun or a feminine verb describing a male noun or verb or something like that. You get marks off for that. It has to be feminine with feminine, masculine with masculine. Now, since the words upon this rock is feminine, that means there must be another feminine noun further up in the passage for it to refer to. And that feminine noun is the Greek word homologia, which means confession or profession. Your confession, or what you profess to believe. So now, this word homologia is not really used in that passage, but the concept is. So this concept correctly points back to Peter's confession in Matthew 16:16 when he said that you are the Christ. That confession is homologia. That's the feminine noun that they were talking about here that Petra refers to. So when we put that together, what do we get? Peter's confession is, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that confession is the Petra. Let me explain that again. Petra is a feminine noun. Petros is a masculine noun. So that means a feminine noun has to go with a feminine word. Petra is feminine. The last feminine noun in that passage was homologia, which is the confession that Peter made. So therefore, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God, is the Petra that Jesus is building his church on. Let me explain. Let me go further into that. That is why Hebrews 4:14 and 10:23 says to us, hold fast to the confession or profession of your faith. That same word confession, profession is the same word homologia. That is the confession. And what is the confession? Romans 10 and 9. If thou wilt confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart, you will be saved. What's a confession? If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Lord means owner, and every king is automatically a Lord. So therefore, if you confess that Jesus is king, you're confessing that Jesus is the Christ, because the word Christ means anointed king. So when you confess that Jesus is the Christ, that becomes the immovable rock, the Petra, that Petros comes from. Can you put back up the picture, please? Picture, please. Picture, the picture, the last slide with the picture. The picture, the rock, the pictures of the rock. This is the immovable rock, the confession. Because when your faith is in that, remember, Peter is not here, so he can't be the foundation. Even Jesus is not here physically, so he really can't be the foundation either. Your foundation is the fact that you believe with all your heart that Jesus is the king. And when you believe that Jesus is king, that sets the stage for everything you do in your life. This is the Petra, this is the Petros. And Peter says that we are all, that's why Peter could say, we are all lively stones built together to form the church, which is built on this. We are all lively stones fitted together to build the church, and the church is built on the Petra. Our confession that Jesus is Lord, Jesus is King. That is why when we make that confession, it is a walk of faith. Because we can't really see them. That's why we walk by faith in the kingdom and not by sight. So, Peter's declaration, Peter's confession, Peter's profession, or his homologia about the Messiah's person is what led to Jesus giving a declaration of his kingly program or agenda for the church. The reason that Jesus was able to give his agenda to the church is because Peter had that Petra. Because you can't understand the purpose of the church if you really don't understand that Jesus is king. We'll see that in a minute. Unless we get to understand that Jesus is king, we won't understand the church. So, moving on, Jesus says, I will build my church. Now, this is important for our kingdom citizens to understand because it is our misconception of what the church really is and who is to build it that has us in the state that we are in today. So let us clear that up, right? Jesus said, I will build my church. I will build my. I lets us know who's doing the building. Jesus is the one building this thing, not you or me. That's a possessive pronoun. I, me. I doing this. Not you, me. I building it. Will build lets me know that this building construction must go on. It has no intention of stopping Against all odds, this project will continue no matter what. My lets me know two things. One, it lets me know that who owns this particular building project that we're talking about. Jesus owns this building project. And my also lets me know that there are others. There are other institutions that look just like this. But this one I'm describing to you right here, this is mine. Mine means there are others. That is my phone. I can say that is my phone because Jimmy has a phone, Pastor has a phone, Andy has a phone, everybody has a phone. But that is my phone. And I can describe what my phone looks like to you so that when you see it, you will know that it's my phone. So these 3 points can be summed up in one verse, Acts 2:47. And it says, the king added to his church daily as such should be saved. The king, Jesus, remember he added, I will build my church. He added to the church daily. I will build it. And we see that being fulfilled in Acts 2:47. The king added to the church daily as such should be saved. And how does one get saved? By your picture, by your confession that Jesus Christ is Lord, is King. With me still so far? Okay. Now, in essence, this thing that is being built, this thing that's being constructed, is under one authority. Because in a kingdom, you can only have one king. A nomination of another king or putting another king in power is an act of treason, an act of high treason. Now, let's look at the word church. The word church is the Greek word ecclesia, which means the assembly of called out ones under authority. Now, however, it's important to note two things here. One, Jesus did not invent the word ecclesia. Some people think that. Jesus did not invent the word ecclesia. And a question. The called out ones were called out from what to what? First, it's important to note here that Jesus did not invent the word church. That word was invented by the Greeks. And then, when the Romans took over the Greeks, they took all their books and the information and their knowledge and the ideas and their philosophies, and they turned it into their system and put it in their form of government that caused them to become the most powerful empire at the time. So, that means everybody, including Jesus, knew what an ecclesia was because all of them were subject to an ecclesia. Even Jesus. He was subject to the Roman ecclesia. Everybody in Israel, in Judea, and in the known world at the time knew what an ecclesia was. And the second thing we have to ask is, these people that were called out from what to what? When the Roman Empire took over a particular country, the emperor king would establish an ecclesia, a called out governing body of authority, because only a king can have an ecclesia. Remember, if your confession is not based on the fact that Jesus is king, you cannot understand ecclesia. That's what I said. Only a king can have an ecclesia. Only a king can have a call out assembly. That ecclesia would be a group of hand-picked citizens that were called out from the common public to exercise authority and rulership on behalf of the Roman government. The ecclesia, their responsibility was to institute the will and the demands of the Roman government. The ecclesia was then responsible for taking the mind and the thoughts of the king, turning it into legislation, and then training the new citizens on their rights, responsibilities, privileges of their new home, Rome. concept. Brother, stand up, please. Stand up. Brother Steve, join me, please. Stand up, please, Brother Jimmy. All right. I am Emperor King. Not really, but yeah. I just chose 3 of these men. This is my ecclesia. My job would be to take my thoughts, my will, my intentions, tell it to them, and they will now go to y'all and make sure that y'all know what I think and do what I want y'all to do. That's right. So their responsibility was to stay as close to me as possible so they can accurately get what it is I'm thinking, what it is I want done, how I want y'all to act, how I want y'all to behave, what laws I want, and it yada, 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 yada. That is what an ecclesia was. I handpicked each and every one of them. Handpicked. Chose out, called out from the public to join me so they can get my mind, so that now they could go back to you and tell you what I think, because I, as Emperor King, can't leave where I'm at. Everybody get that concept? Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. You understand? That was an ecclesia. Okay, good. Now, in essence, an ecclesia in the Greek language has nothing at all to do with religion. It has nothing to do with religion. This is important to know because Jesus did not come to establish a religion. He came to establish a kingdom. So by default, the word ecclesia is a political term, not a religious term.